Hello, Watch Voice Focus as we reflect on a tough night at the City Ground as Nottingham Forest lost 2-0 to Brentford. We'll look at what went wrong last night, what's been going wrong more generally in the last few weeks, plus we'll ask if Forest can recover to claim that Champions League place we've all been dreaming of, in the company, first of all, of Pete Blackburn. Morning, Pete. How you doing?
Yeah, a little bit gutted, but pleased to see Mark and Prutton on here again. It's been a while since I've been with both of them, so hopefully they've got some good stuff to say to cheer me up.
No pressure. Hopefully they've got some good stuff to say. Mark Sutherns, good to have you on with us on a morning show. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm a bit more level-headed than I was post-match, and I'm in my hotel room. I've got the Do Not Disturb sign up. It's telling that the only time I get to use that at a hotel is to go online to do a podcast and talk about XG, basically. That's my life, basically. Nothing exciting. Let's just do XG.
We do have some charts, not all XG, don't worry, but XG is a bit of one of them. So we'll get into that. David Prutton, you were at the game last night. So yeah, how are you?
I'm good. I think we found the only pocket of England where it absolutely launched it down, which was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I just to really paint myself in the most pathetic midlife crisis kind of shape that you could. I went over on my motorbike in the sunshine thinking, this is amazing. This is amazing. I had to be in the compound, and then for about 5 minutes, second half, I was just looking at the rain going, what an idiot. What an absolute idiot. And then proceeded to get absolutely sodden on the way out. So there you go. At least you didn't get rained on. There you go. There's every cloud and all that, literally.
Did you have lightning at the game?
Where the gantry is, it was behind the Brian Clough stand. I don't know where it made land. I don't think it was too close. What's the protocol with that? I mean, do we have to stop? And
I think you just have to go and stand on the halfway line, hold an umbrella up.
Looking around going, this is legit. This is how you sort it out. Fine, he's like shoved on the pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, the Prutz weather vane. Right. Let's get into it a bit then. Mark, kick us off if you would, just with general thoughts on what you witnessed.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, first of all, that the fans' reaction is critical here, in that, out of defeat, out of a bad performance, we talk about how the team react, but also we've got a role to play in the final games, and as fans we can't react to extreme to what we've seen. We've obviously seen 2 back-to-back home performances, which were as bad as we've seen all season, really, but it has been a season of highlights, and the fact that we're lamenting those defeats come off the back of the fact that we're in reach of a Champions League place, which is obviously a dream scenario we never expected to be in. So I think it's important we establish that first, that caveat, that we've got to be level-headed in our appraisal of what we saw last night, and perhaps what we saw in the previous home game as well. I think, though, I do look at numbers, and looking at the numbers that we've seen of the last 6 matches, and bearing in mind that's Ipswich away, United home, Villa away, Everton at home, Spurs away, Brentford at home. Not the toughest of fixture runs, I think it's fair to say. The numbers aren't great, and I think it was there. You don't need to look at the numbers to see last night that we're making more errors in defence. I think we can put them down to errors, both those goals. But also, while the defence will come under scrutiny, we're just not creating chances. We're really struggling to create chances. Over the last 6 matches, we've only created 4 big chances that would have expected to be scored. 4 big chances is fewer than any other team over their last 6. So fewer than Ipswich and Leicester City. So that's damning. That we could see that against Everton and against Brentford last night. I think we didn't look like scoring, and we didn't look like creating. And the other side of that is also, we're conceding chances. We haven't done that all season, and we're making some mistakes. And without that pillar, without that platform of the defence, with the attack struggling as it is, we're not in a good place right now. That's fair to say. But it's not over. We've got the opportunity to turn it around, and we have bounced back before this season, and we can still do that. And as supporters, we've got a role to play in that.
On screen, for those who are listening, not watching, I've just put up team data defence for the last 6 matches. This was before the Brentford game, and we're 18th in that. So obviously, this is last 6 attacking matches as referenced, and we're 16th for that. Those are taken from FPL Black Box, by the way. I hope that doesn't mind that. I hear that podcast has enjoyed a vast week since Mark departed. So no, thanks to them for that. Appreciate that in advance. Right, let's just look. I want to look at more generally the factors behind the recent slump, and we'll get into specifics after that. So in my notes, all right, what are the factors behind our loss of form? And I've just put some down that I could think of, and some that I've spotted on Twitter. So tiredness, confidence, carrying injuries. I still don't think some of these players are fully fit, certainly. Individual lapses, as Mark mentioned, defensive resolve on the slide, lack of goals, and been figured out with the things that I've thought of or seen. What do you, when you look at us, Prutz, what do you think is missing? What are the biggest factors? Is confidence and tiredness a genuine paramount thing? What are you seeing?
The confidence one is a strange one because, as you said about talking about the season broadly, there should be a real effervescence and confidence just absolutely beaming out of each and every player. Now, we are talking about human beings, so to think that is something that they can tap into every couple of days to make sure that performance levels are there, I think is a big challenge. And obviously, when we talk about this, we are talking about it in a purely footballing terms with regards to what dedication's needed and hard work and all that type of stuff, as opposed to other professions. But the Forest that I saw last night, and it's been like this for the past few seasons, the effort and endeavour was absolutely there. Just that ability, as Mark said, to create chances. We'll come on to the specifics of the goals. That looked like a confidence thing with the goals. A lack of communication, a lack of really taking charge when this Forest defence, particularly Murillo and Milinkovic, has been just staggeringly solid, hasn't it? It's what great attacking teams are built on, a good defence. And then coming up against the side last night that has got its own ambitions for finishing in a European spot. And the creative players like Morgan, again, no lack of effort, couldn't really unlock anything. Chris barely touched the ball in the first half. There's nothing that was being provided for him. I don't think that's a confidence thing. Yes, we're looking at a player that's been out of the side with injury. Ola as well. You could sense, again, another player that's had a tremendous season. I think it's perfectly fine to describe him as looking slightly rusty last night with regards to what he did going forward and what he did with from a defensive aspect. So the way that we kind of talked about it on commentary and tried to knit it all together is the effort that's gone into where they have put themselves and the games that they've seen teams off when they've been at their explosive best have been off the back of such a long period of work in the season that I sincerely hope that they're not running out of steam at the most important time. I can't think it would be anything to do with the training. It won't, because we know what Nuno's like. Very, very kind of precise with what he wants. I can't think of it would be anything to do with the motivation, because once again, you've got a manager that wants to get Forest into the Champions League. You've got an ownership group that absolutely wants to get Forest in the Champions League. And his face was thunder, wasn't it, when that goal went in just before half-time? And the players, again, a very driven, ambitious group of players that are playing out the skins. Now, if you look at these players and we applaud them for being put together and creating a certain standard, the question marks come of, is this group of players, each and every individual, coming from a team that's always been fighting for the top end of a table, European spots, whichever country they come from? And broadly, you'd have to say no. So therefore, we now find out whether this group of players is good enough / great enough to be able to compete at that top level, because you have to be able to go there every single game when the pressure's there, when the expectation's there. Fans are stepping up. My God, the atmosphere last night was amazing. Absolutely amazing. They were absolutely doing their bit. Put that in contrast with what we saw with Arsenal in the Champions League the other night. The Forest fans absolutely doing their bit and winning the team on. And the reaction shouldn't be too histrionic. And I hate to use the word fatigue. There's a comment said about a tiredness, and I totally get it. I totally get it if you're looking at a footballer and saying, how can you possibly be tired? I absolutely get that. But it is a factor. given what the team has done so far this season. I just sincerely hope it's not coming at that time when it's the traffic is getting pretty choppy in those places, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so massively. I know, Pete. I'll ask this question to Pete because I know he wants to talk about it. I saw a thing on Team Talk Sport today saying Forest recent results. Are they going to bottle Europe? And I've seen that's a comment from quite a few people online about us bottling it. I don't think that's fair, and I think there's so much context around it. I assume you don't think that's fair either, Pete.
Well, it's not a question of whether it's fair or not. It's a question of it just being totally and utterly absurd. One absolutely ridiculous thing to say. I mean, I'll get onto the bottling thing first, but if I just give my 2p quickly on the general situation, my feeling, I sort of feel a bit stupid saying things like this after Prutz has just spoken about it, given he's actually done all this stuff and I'm just a bloke watching it on the TV. But like, I had probably 3 takeaways from the game. I think the first one is we had a coach who used to bang on about fine margins, right? And it became a bit of a cliche that we used to laugh at and such like. But that is basically what football is. Unlike a lot of sports, football is a game where tiny moments turn it massively. And I think the game showed us, firstly, just how powerfully a narrative takes hold after tiny events turn a football match. For me, hands up, I don't think Forest were good last night at all. They looked laboured. A lot of it was poor. But I think it was pretty much a nothing game without the mistakes that happened in the Forest backline. Realistically, I think for most of the season, that game plays out as a 0-0 or a 1-1 if both teams get a moment. I don't think it's a big win for either team. I don't think anyone was particularly impressive. We just had 2 moments where we totally lost our heads or lost our footing. And it was, you get punished because they've got brilliant players in those positions. But so many times this season, Forest have played out that sort of game, and it's just been a horrible 0-0. And we don't talk about it, do we? Because either it's a 0-0 and we talk about the grit and the battling effort of the players, or we sneak a 1-0 because Chris Woodhead makes that header and it goes in, and it's an unbelievable goal. We've seen that so many times. And then we talk about how ruthless and efficient Forest are from, getting these 1-0 wins without any great chances. That's my first takeaway. I think narrative's massive. And I think we're really overdoing it if we say that this is a monumental drop-off from Forest. I think it's a small drop-off, and I think it only takes a small drop-off for Forest to regress to the mean because we've been outperforming so miraculously for most of the season. My second sort of takeaway on it is I think the players look a bit spent, to be honest. Whether that's physical tiredness, whether it's mental tiredness, I don't know where one thing ends and the other begins. I think they look like a team who we spoke on the preview about hoping that we could continue to see these games as just opportunity, just all upside, not about burden and pressure. But in recent weeks, they have started to talk the talk a bit, haven't they? They start to talk about cup finals and that side of things. And I think for me, it feels a bit like a team who finally not being able to do the whole one game at a time thing and have started to feel like this is a massive opportunity and there's pressure. I wouldn't criticise them for that 1 second. I think it's remarkable that athletes and sports people manage to do that game by game and isolate everything and just keep going again. For me, that's probably just a totally human emotion. Whether it's true or not, it's just my sort of instinct on seeing it. But it feels like maybe a bit of that's happened, and none of them have done this before. I think it must be incredibly hard. I think maybe they've just started to feel a bit of the pressure, and perhaps it tells them. Perhaps that's where mistakes come from. Again, monstrous speculation, but I guess that's what we're here for. I'm just trying to be reasonable about it. And I think the third thing is, we said it before, options for change are really slim, right, in this squad. This is where you are when this is your first season of trying to move up the Premier League. We've had a couple of seasons of battling just to stay in this thing. This is what we're here for now. We've fought to be here, and we've gone well ahead of time in getting to this position that we are in. And I think that it's really hard for Nuno to look around and see what he's got to really change a game in a difficult moment. There are players with qualities, but there aren't really players that I would say, get him on. We know that he's got it in him to really take this game by the scruff of the neck. And that's not a criticism of anyone. Our recruitment's been brilliant, but you can't do it all at once. You can't suddenly have a 20 players who can be in your first 11. And you have to do it incrementally, and it's hard and it's difficult, but that's the reality of it. Sorry, this is an unbelievably long answer. I know you're used to that. I'm actually going to answer the question you asked me now. On the bottling thing, I forgot my disappointment and concern about this game within 30 minutes of the game last night, because I was so pissed off when I heard you talk on the post-match stream last night about people calling the players, quote, cowards and having bottled it. I think the term bottling it is ridiculous anyway. People are desperate for there to be simple explanations to complicated human events. That's the human condition, right? We all want to be able to say, this is why something happened. It makes me feel better about my life. It makes me understand it. It's nonsense. Things are complicated. People in the comments saying football shouldn't be tired. Why not? Football's really tiring. Training to be a footballer is exhausting. Of course they should be tired. And then there's all the pressure. That's madness. When it comes to this Forest team, I cannot explain how far from the truth it will be to describe them as bottling it. Who thinks it's reasonable to separate this team from everything they've done so far this season? Suddenly it's a given that we're in the Champions League places, and if we don't finish that off, we've bottled it. That's madness. They've got to keep all of that stuff up, despite the consequences and the impacts of having done it to this point. It's knackering. We've got less players. We've got less money. It's all stacked against us. If you didn't think this was a possibility, then you've not been watching football. What they're doing is achieving against the odds, and it's remarkable. So look, I'd love for every one of these people who call them cowards or bottlers to have someone standing over their desk at work saying that to them every time they make a mistake under pressure. It's an absurd accusation. Can't really believe I'm wasting the time responding to it. I know I'll get some abuse for this. I get some abuse when I criticise the club. But today, I stand up for them because these players have shown phenomenal skill, phenomenal desire, and frankly, an extraordinary amount of bottle all through the season when they've been battling to stay in games against teams that should be beating us. They've defended for their lives, and they've done it all with this great bond between us and them in the stands. Bang on about how good the atmosphere is. Well, we can't just turn as soon as there's a hard moment. But I'm standing by the team and the manager, the staff, the football club. If you can't see that, then I don't know how to relate to that. I don't know if you should be on this journey, to be honest. So look, I'm going to stop speaking. I probably shouldn't speak again for the rest of the podcast now.
Great rap there. That is, I think we're done, mate. That's a record for this. There's no other answers we can give that gets anywhere near what Pete just said, Matt, unfortunately, mate. Well, I think he's done everything, and done it in such a wonderfully poetic and glorious way, Pete. The passion comes shining out of you, mate. You're absolutely right. There's nothing in that I can disagree with at all.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to be tired, but I'm shattered now.
Well, we can't go anywhere because we're contractually obliged to do at least 2 more adverts. So we've got to talk around them.
Just get him in and get him off. We're done. Blackburn nailed it.
Let's introduce one of them first. Obviously, we're off to Crystal Palace on Monday, which we'll talk about at the end. If you don't have a ticket, you can watch the game at the NAV and you can enjoy the build-up. There's a free music festival because it's bank holiday from noon till 8 p.m. 15 local bands playing, free entry. So enjoy the day there, and then you can watch the game on the big screen, outdoors and indoors, Palace v Forest from 8 p.m. Right. Mark, I don't know how you want to respond to that. Pete's given us the... Yeah. I don't know whether to talk about the game or the bigger picture. Let's talk. We'll get back to the game. What chance are you giving us right now of making the top 5? If you like putting a percentage on it, how are you feeling about it all now?
Put a percentage on it. I think we've got to see an upturn in performance, and obviously chance creation in particular. For us to do it, it's in our hands. I still feel it's in our hands because of the way the fixtures fall for Chelsea in particular. I see that we've still got every chance, but we've now got to go to Palace and get some form of result, at least a point, I think, which is going to be difficult unless we flip the way we performed in against Everton and against Brentford. Obviously, we had the Spurs game in between that. That was a strain. I mean, Spurs are low, and we did a job on them. So it's very hard to take too much, I think, from that performance. We won't find Palace anywhere near as accommodating, I think, as Spurs were. Defensively, they're stronger, and they've got probably more informed, confident weapons in attack as well. So that's going to be a really tough game. But we have to get something, I think, now. If we don't get anything at Palace. And we have obviously Leicester coming to us, and that's, that should be seen as a game we should win. But given the 2 home games we've had previously and what we've done in these 2 home games, I don't even think that would be easy if we come out of Palace without anything at all. So I'm kind of probably 50-50 in terms of where we'll make it now, but I am kind of philosophical about that, because I in no way expected to be in this situation, and obviously feel proud of the team to even get us in touching distance of it. So while it would be disappointing to see that slip away, having got so close, and I'm sure the players feel it more than most, and as supporters, we might get that opportunity again, but this group of players may not to get to qualify for the Champions League again. So they're going to feel it more than us. So I feel for them if we don't make it, but we've got to be proud and thank them for where they've got us, and to even give us this opportunity in this dream with 4 games to go. So yeah, I'm 50% to answer your question on whether we'll make it. It really depends on what we get at Palace. We need something, I believe.
Mark is 50%. I did look at Opta. I said I wouldn't, but for you guys, I did. And thankfully, if you believe that stuff or not, I don't know. It still has us finishing 5th. Opta's going to give us a 59% chance. I'm predicting we'll get 66 points to Chelsea's 65, which all points to a last day showdown. What about your view, Prutz? You see across the Premier League, you see more than us. How are you viewing this race for the top 5 now?
Well, I think similarly, going off what Mark said there is the jeopardy's being felt all around, isn't it? That last game, the final game of the season, could be an absolute blockbuster, couldn't it? It's one that is. And again, without sounding too twee about where Forest find themselves, you go from fighting for your survival towards the end of the season to now creating the next incarnation of this football club, which is back to European competition, which would be unbelievable. There's enough inconsistency in the teams that are up and in and around it to think that Forest, without just chucking out a generalisation, have as good a chance as the other teams that are involved in that. I saw Villa just the other week absolutely destroy Newcastle, but we know that those teams that have had other fronts to fight on have been having to accommodate that. There's a good comment in the section in the comments about Palace potentially eyeing whatever throws at them from an FA Cup final point of view. You could hope that could be the case. It's about Forest taking care of their own business, isn't it? And they're all eminently winnable games. Absolutely. I just think it's going to be a real test of the players' resolve. As we sometimes have spoken about in the past, players getting to this stage of the season and needing to really pull out an A game to get themselves out of trouble that they've collectively played themselves into. This feels like a different beast altogether, because the prize for the last generation has always been about getting back into the Premier League. Then it was about staying in the Premier League. Now it's just something that I presume parents, grandparents are passing down to kids and fans of a certain age now, going, well, this is where Forest used to knock about for a very long period of time. So this is where maybe the weight of history comes in, which again, I don't think should weigh too heavily on the players, because they've carved out their own little niche in the recent kind of Forest history books. So yeah, I mean the predictor there, I can absolutely see Forest finishing there. I just think the jeopardy that is going to unfold is just going to be a great test of the team at its most stretched, I think, from a point of view of games and minutes under his belt, and a real test of what Nuno can do and whether he can change in game. Because I know there was discussions last night about substitutions that were made, about approaches to the game, reacting to what Brentford could do and evidently can do to a lot of teams in the division. And collectively, there'll be many things to be pondering off the back of A, the result, and B, the performance.
Yeah, we'll get into subs and more in-game stuff shortly. Just before I throw it to Pete for his thoughts, just a reminder of the fixtures the other teams face, looking mostly at Villa and Chelsea. Villa have got Fulham, Bournemouth, Tottenham, United, and I would imagine they have to win all 4 games, which they certainly can do. Chelsea have got Liverpool, Newcastle, United, and then us away on the last day. It says home there, but it's actually at our place, of course. So they're probably going to need to win 3 out of 4. And then we have now got Palace, Leicester, West Ham, and Chelsea, and we're probably going to have to win 3 of those games, I would say. So how are you feeling about it, Pete?
Yeah, I don't think that Opta analysis is sort of far off where I am. I think I'd probably, if you'd have asked me about telling me that, I think I probably would have put it about sort of 60-65% just based on the fixtures. I think the fixtures are actually relatively kind, and we're probably starting to forget that Chelsea are unlikely to be winning that many of those games. I don't think they're that trustworthy a team. I think what's really happened is Forest have started to struggle a little bit, and the teams around us have had this run where they've decided to actually win games. Whereas for so much of this sort of second half of the season, we were either labouring to the odd win, or we were having a mistake like the game against Bournemouth or whatever, but nobody else capitalised on it, and that's why it all felt so comfortable previously. It's obviously not so comfortable at all now. I think, yes, something like 65% based on the fixtures. I think there's at least 7 to 9. I mean, there's 7 to 9 points in it for Forest, I think, easily, if they can sort of throw off that sense of whatever it is that we're worried that they might have, whether it's that tiredness or the pressure or whatever. Obviously, that's hugely definitive. I don't think Chelsea are going to score massive points, and I think they'll have to beat us on the last day of the season if they're going to do it. So I think we'll probably, maybe it's just hopeful, but I think we'll start to see in the coming games a little bit of a change where the points are dropped, and it's felt like that hasn't happened for a while, and hopefully that'll change the sort of sense of pressure and some of the feeling amongst the fans. And hopefully, Monday night we could be going into a game where that has happened, where points have been dropped, and instead of sort of feeling like everyone's hunting us, we've got an opportunity to strike back a bit. So that's where I am. I think, given what we saw last night against Everton, I do have this general fear that, the sort of pressure of all this competition of the semi-final of the Cup and this Champions League qualification might have had an impact on the players. Hopefully that can be impacted if it is true, or hopefully it's not true. But I still think we've got a really good shot. I think I'd probably back them to do it still, just about.
I guess, Mark, you would take a last day shootout with Chelsea, even if we had to win the game. If we could, it was win or nothing. Right now, you'd take that, wouldn't you? Yeah,
I would now. Yeah, I didn't want that. I was looking forward to putting our feet up for that game and enjoying the party, but no, that's not going to happen now, I don't think. If we go into the final day and it's in our hands and we have to beat Chelsea to do it, I'd take that now, I think. But, we need Liverpool to beat Chelsea. We need Newcastle to beat Chelsea. If that happens and we can pick up points, it may still not come down to that. So we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of football to be played. I think just the issue is that if you look at the teams competing for these top 5 places, we're probably the team stuttering the most. I know Chelsea have not been great and they're struggling for consistency. The advantage they have got is a vast squad. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that next. We don't have those options, and that's because we didn't really expect to be in this situation. We're not equipped to be in this situation and get through it. So we are doing it against the odds, and I think that's the only thing that makes me feel that, we may fall short.
Let's get into the game now in more depth then. I'll stick with you, Mark. Was that first half drastically different from what we've seen in a lot of games and up until we conceded? I mean, I'm a bit worried about how we start games, but in general, it was a bit of battling, a bit 0-0. As usual, if we get the first goal, that's massive. We conceded at an absolutely horrific time and it changes everything. I mean, was it a totally different game to what we've seen quite a lot from Forest this season or not?
Maybe not. I think, the first 15 we struggled. They had the upper hand and we started to wrestle control a little bit and get a good share, and then we started to create half chances. I think the problem as I saw it, and the turning point as I saw it, was when Hudson-Odoi picked up the injury, and for some reason we didn't react to that. I'm still puzzled as to what happened there, because we had Dominguez stripped off, ready to come on. I could see from my view, he had everything ready to come on, and then for some reason we left Hudson-Odoi on.
I'll just interject there. Sorry, I've got a bit of a theory on that. He did his hamstring. We all saw it when he sprinted with the fullback, and Dominguez was stripped, and then Hudson-Odoi put a cross in with his bad leg, and I just wonder if they said, "Oh, we can put a cross in. Let's give him till half time," and that was probably an error. I don't know.
But I still saw Hudson-Odoi holding his hamstring after that, and for me, he was a passenger who was just occupying a defender. He wasn't, and why that's important is because for us to break down teams, for us to create chances, we need that twin threat with Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, so that we can switch play from right to left, create one-on-one situations, create overloads. And when Hudson-Odoi is not able and not available to receive the ball, I was watching him. He didn't put himself in situations to receive the ball. He didn't want the ball because he didn't want to test the injury. He wanted, obviously, to try and buy some time and get through it. But I think that was a bad decision on his part, and perhaps a bad decision on Nuno's part not to react. But also, it kind of indicates the faith we've got in our bench to come on. We haven't got a player who can come on, even though we've got Sousa who can play that position, to come on and provide, the same quality that Hudson-Odoi can provide. Of course, there's a big drop-off. So the only alternative we had was Dominguez, which would be really a change of shape, a change of emphasis. Without the two wingers and the ability to switch play, we really struggled to break down teams. And I think when Hudson-Odoi got the injury, for me, we were just making it through to half-time at that point where Nuno was going to change it.
Yeah, that does lead into my gripe with the subs, which touched on a couple of people in the chat. Jason talking about Dominguez was the wrong sub. Pat, why Dominguez? Dominguez, to me, puts it, if it's 0-0 at half-time, I can see Dominguez more viably. But when you're 1-0 down and, you need that twin threat, putting on Dominguez felt like a pretty odd choice to me. I don't know. What do you think?
No, yeah, I totally agree. And it's not, there's many things that he's good at, but it was almost kind of seen as a bit of a consolidatory sub, didn't it? And you're kind of going, but the team's losing. And again, that's no disrespect to what Dominguez can bring to the side. It just felt, I mean, the as you say, the timing of the goal, just terrible. I mean, there's another school of thought that any time that someone scores against you isn't a good time, is it? But it was seemingly, and again, it's sliding doors. I think you get to half-time and then kind of work out where to go next without conceding. Then the second half, I think, is different. It might even have changed what Nuno thought with the substitutions. And then when you get to the point where you are chasing the game and then you end up with two up top, even with two up top, the service wasn't forthcoming, was it? Chris, as I said earlier on, spent a lot of time in the first half chasing a couple of lost causes. Again, no lack of effort or endeavour, just nobody anywhere really near him to provide the service. But when you do, go back to Pete's point earlier on, defend like that at two very specific moments in the game, in the Premier League game, you just give yourself a mountain to climb. I've done a fair few games, and Milinkovic has been utterly reliable and rock solid. And you do have those games, my word, I had more than a fair share in my time, where he just looked uncertain and he looked like he'd lost his bearings within a defence that looked like it felt a little bit shaky as well. There was an obvious frustration from Murillo with the way that the game was going. There was one time in the first half, probably about 20-odd minutes in, he's on the ball, and what he does, where he rolls his boot over the top, he's looking for something, and then in the end, he has to pass it back, and his arms are up in the air. Now, normally that would drive me insane, but he was right. There was no movement. There was Elanga on this side with his arm up in the air. That's a 60-yard pass, which he's got, but very, very high risk. And Callum down the other side, who wasn't, again, a bit of trepidation about the way he was playing, and kind of Chris stood in the middle just looking at him, which when it does end up like that, I can see how frustrating it can be for the man on the ball and also the fans as well. But given how close the game was, and especially in the first half, those chances that you afford the opposition, Sharda's finish is very smart. It doesn't happen without Milinkovic. Again, and this is me not piling into him, but just balls over the top, and you kind of go, I don't know how you can get that so chronically wrong, to be so far away from the rest of your defence. And then his reaction wasn't great. His reaction to get back wasn't great at all, which again, how many times could you have said that about Milinkovic this season? Not once, I'd say. So the lack of attacking intent coupled with a shaky defensive display in a Premier League game equals that defeat, doesn't it? I mean, the Wissa goal, I know it particularly sticks in the craw because it's a player that Forest have been interested in. Again, Murillo goes for the header against Mbeumo. Mbeumo's not going to beat him in the air. He just gets dragged out. Sunday League style, bounces over Milinkovic. I mean, the finish is extraordinarily good. It's just a gorgeous finish. It just goes to show that on the night, that gulfing class between the finishing ability of that side, on the night, and Forest, there was a huge difference. And Brian Mbeumo is a player I could watch every single day of the week. A wonderful footballer, and someone who is so effective. So there's so many things that went into that defeat, and the way that Forest didn't affect the game, either with the subs that came on or the players that started the match. to be quite, that ends up going back to Pete's point again, so very eloquently puts it, where you can get miffed about the game, but you have to absolutely put it in context. I'd like to think it was an off day, even though in recent weeks there has been signs of a performance potentially and a defeat such as this, hasn't there?
Yeah, I thought Damsgaard into that bracket as well. I thought he was really good player, really quality player. Yeah, I think that defensive thing is within games. I think that's been our biggest issue. It's felt like even games where we've won, like United and Spurs, we haven't looked rock solid. And then we throw in a couple of goals like that. I mean, those are goals that teams that get relegated concede, not teams pushing for Europe, which you can't really legislate for. But I think that's our biggest factor because we hang in that game. Even at 1-0, the crowd was up. We still felt like we were in it. The goals we conceded were absolute killers. And I know people are saying,
Matt, sorry to bother you, mate. I mean, I've just because you said it vividly reminds me of what we were chatting about last night during the game. There was a real groundswell where the fans kind of thought, right, we're going to go again here. Let's go another gear. And it went up and up. And I was chatting away saying, the fans are doing the best to get them back in the game and they're playing their part. Can the team do it? Boom, bounce over Milenkovic, back of the net. And it just, you could feel it. And I totally get it. Just the utter kind of, it was just such a deflatorary goal, wasn't it? Any goals are kicking the teeth. But at that time, and this is not blowing smoke up but Forest fans' backsides, but there was a collective understanding that the team needed them, and they stepped forward. And you can count it on the fingers of one hand the amount of times that the Forest players have disappointed or let the fans down, if any. You know what I mean? This season, but. In that moment, the irony of them really going up another couple of decibels and then the goal going in, it just felt one of those where you go, well, tonight's not going to be the night, is it?
Yeah.
I just wonder, sorry, Matt, I just wonder with the Milenkovic era, whether the nature of the first goal and the pace and guile of Visser were factors. Because obviously, having seen Sharda come inside and get on the end of that long ball, Milenkovic was wary of the pace around him. And Visser, is a striker there's few like him in the Premier League who have his size and pace and agility playing down the middle. You look at who Milenkovic has come up against recently, Solanke, Højlund, I think Broja for Everton, Watkins for Villa. These are all players that I think Milenkovic can go touch type to and have a physical battle. Same with Mateta on Monday. He'll be much more at home with Mateta, I think, than he is with a player like Visser. And I do wonder whether that first goal just absolutely rattled us or rattled the confidence at the back, and the communication with Murillo and Milenkovic just went completely. And they were just unsettled by Wisser's pace because having been done by Sharda and his pace, we were really, really tentative.
I know
the other part about it is you've got a Brentford side there that over the course of the season has been predominantly without its first choice fullbacks. Keane Lewis Potter we'll talk about in a second, but Coyote on the other side, obviously Hudson-Odoi was injured, but he boxed him off in the first half, even though there was a couple of sketchy moments. Second half, he did pretty well against Anthony, didn't he? And this is a 20-year-old kid on loan from Fiorentina that just epitomised everything that Brentford were about last night. Got up, got down, got up, got down. We talked about Sharda and Mbuemo. Great defensively. Those periods of time when Forest were in the ascendancy, those two were right back. And Mark mentions Wisser as well. Wisser's just kind of in touch with the top end of the midfield, but predominantly on his own when Forest were attacking. And on the night, attack-wise and defensively, Brentford were just better. That's where the game is kind of boiled down to black and white. They were containing what Forest could do. The only real save that Flecker made was Anthony coming in on his right and looking for the bottom corner. Which that was the only time the Brentford goalie I can remember was at full stretch for anything and looking towards it. And again, not saying there was nothing up till the final third or the 18-yard box. Balls into the box. Taiwo trying to get onto a ball that's 2 foot over his head and 3 foot over there on the break, where Jota, you're putting balls in without any real quality. That was where it was a question of quality on the night, not overall, because we're talking about a team that's above another team in the division that's been consistently better. Forest have been than Brentford by virtue where the placings are in the division. But on the night, the quality wasn't there.
Yeah, I don't think Brentford are an entirely different team from us in a lot of ways. They they're a moments team as well. They don't create tons of chances, and we're the same. And they won the moments with quality. With like, this is a great player, and we didn't. I mean, the goals Brentford scores as well, quality finish. But I think they were getting some praise for like, oh, they've seen a weakness in Forest at the back. No, they were just they were good balls, but got to defend them. Like 99 times out of 100, you defend them. Milenkovic would be eating that up all day. So if that was Brentford's tactics, I'd have been saying yes, please, if I knew that before the game to hit us long. We just let ourselves down in that area badly. I just want to wrap up the subs question quickly because I see people talking about the ref. We will get on to the ref. Taiwo and Chris Wood, Pete, I love them both. I don't like them as a pair. I know Chris Wood spent a lot of his career playing with a second striker at Burnley, but him and Taiwo don't like a pairing at all. I hate it when Nuno does it. And that was another sub I didn't like last night. Taiwo getting absolutely slaughtered, but Chris Wood getting slaughtered as well for his performances. I will throw the question to you. Sorry. Chris Wood had like 3 chances in the last since he's come back, and I think he scored 2 of them. One was offside against Spurs, the other one he scored. And that header last night he should have done better with. But the guy's getting no service. Taiwo's getting no service. Nuno sub to put Dominguez on and then give them to no service, just lump the ball up to them. I did feel sorry for them. Pick up on what I've said, Pete. There's no question there.
Well, I mean, first reflection, what a shame, what a surprise that Taiwo is getting slagged off by everyone. There's a new one. That's always going to be the case. People have made up their minds about him, and I've done all my speeches about how that's a bit unfair given all the context and whatever. But I think, generally speaking, I don't have big reactions to substitutes because I always think, look, the manager's got so much more intelligence in every way than I have in terms of what he knows about the sort of the fitness levels of the players, and what he knows what they can do in training, all that sort of stuff. But also just generally smarter as it comes to football than I am. But I don't get the Wood and Taiwo up front together thing. If we had some different players, then maybe you could see the sort of the barrage into them, but I just don't really think we're made for that. So I'm not sure what it's for. Neither of them are particularly mobile right now. I don't really see the link up. I don't really get where that's going. It's the only time this season really that I would heavily criticise Nuno was in that Fulham game where we played them both. And I just couldn't really understand it whatsoever. I suspect that where we are at with that is that he looked around him and just thought, I don't really trust any of these players to make a difference for me. It's what we've spoken about before. And, we know that Taiwo can come on and cause problems with his physicality, and maybe it'll just help something drop. Maybe it will force a little change and there'll be a tiny moment. It doesn't really make sense to me as a tactical ploy, but I'm not sure it really is that. I think it's, probably a sense of desperation to a degree. I have no issue with Taiwo coming on for Wood in that game, personally, if it was that way around. I think we've seen this season, and probably beforehand, Wood does struggle in games where he's got 2 big old centre-halves up against him. He often gets dominated like that. No criticism of him whatsoever. He's remarkable and has been incredible. We wouldn't be where we are without him. But we do see it. Everton was the same. Sometimes he is just dominated like that. I don't think he's got the skill set to get away sometimes. So for me, having Taiwo in that position late on, swapping them would make some sense, because the first thing that happened when Taiwo is on the pitch is that a long ball goes up to him, and with whatever mad skills and attributes Taiwo's got physically or technically, he manages to stop the centre-halves getting in. It sort of lands at his feet and we get an attack, and I think we went and had a corner. And he's capable of doing that. So I think that's a tactic. Having them both on together, I don't get it. The Dominguez thing didn't annoy me that much, to be honest, because again, I'm not sure Nuno's got faith in the replacements. And to be honest, I haven't got massive faith in them. I think Sosa and Jota are both players who can offer something, but they're not players who come on and I think, right, they're going to change this game for us against a set Brentford team who've got a goal, and it's just to see it out. I think it's asking too much of what they've got personally. And Dominguez, whilst he doesn't come on and do the direct replacement for Hudson-Odoi in an attacking sense, he does do the direct replacement in trying to give us a little bit of control, someone who can hold onto the ball, and ultimately someone who can press like an absolute monster. And that's what you hope with him, I guess, coming on. You hope that he's going to force a mistake and give you an opportunity. So I think that there are different ways to get about it, and I presume that's what the plan with Dominguez was. So I didn't have a massive issue with it. He's a better player than the other players who could have come on, and I can see how it's realistic option. I just think Nuno hasn't got the resources he needs to turn around a game against a really, really solid Premier League side. And that's sort of fine, I guess. That's where we're at. That's where we're at right now.
I think so. We will get to the ref. Should Dominguez have started, Mark? I've seen some people, another post-match sentiment, and during the match as well. We shouldn't be leaving out Dominguez. He's one of our best midfielders. Or did it make sense to you to get some extra energy with Yates into the team?
Yeah, Yates hadn't had the same minutes in his leg, so it made sense, I think. I do prefer Dominguez in that position. I think he gives us a bit more quality and control. So, yes, I see the case for saying Dominguez should have started, but I think it made sense to give Yates the run out in a game where, he's up against combative midfielders in that area, and he can go toe-to-toe with them. So I think it made sense. I wasn't surprised, and I wasn't, I didn't see that as a problem, Yates starting over Dominguez. I just think, as Pete says, I think it was throwing Tyro on alongside Chris Wood was like a blunt instrument, and we didn't have any creativity around it. That's what we needed. Chris Wood and Tyro, the only way you activate them is if you create chances for them, and we didn't have players on the pitch that could do that. Alanga was being nullified, Gibbs White was being nullified, Callum Hudson-Odoi wasn't on the pitch, and in Sousa and Jota, we don't have players who can come on and, when they're having an off day, replace them and create opportunities for our strikers. So that's what we're missing. We're missing that type of player. Unfortunately, Sousa and Jota aren't up to that role at the moment. They're just not able to. Maybe they never will be. And I think the fact that we turned to Dominguez to replace Hudson-Odoi probably indicates to me that Sousa won't be around perhaps at the club next season, be on loan or shipped out, whatever it be, because surely that was the environment for him to come on. We're 1-0 down. Left wing has gone off injured. We're not creating chances. Let's bring on Sousa. That surely would have been the answer. The fact that Nuno didn't do that means that, as Pete says, we don't really have faith in him to provide that, and we went for Dominguez's stability and hope that his pressing would make the difference. I don't knock Dominguez. I think he's a great player. I like him as a midfielder. I don't think he's to blame in any shape or form for the result or the performance. I just think on the night we just didn't have the creativity breaking down. Chris Wood was pocketed by Nathan Collins, and we didn't have the answer.
Yeah, the Sousa sub was the one I was kind of hoping for at half-time. And also, I think Jota as a second striker with Wood wasn't the worst option. He came on at Villa and created a lot of problems and scored a goal. I'd rather have seen Jota get 30 minutes as that second striker, personally, just for a bit of a different pairing. Right, we'll talk about the ref briefly just before we do. A word of thanks for Vesta Blinds. I don't think Prutz has been on with a Vesta Blinds advert. What a treat for him. If you're looking for new blinds or shutters made to measure, in the Notts and East Midlands area, do check them out. I mean, that's the review for the billboard, isn't it? Wow, David Prutton.
Yes. Yeah, if they're chucking out mates rates, get them up to North Yorkshire.
Exactly. Prutz, talk to us about the ref. A lot of people saying Lewis Potter should have been sent off. I mean, I'll be honest, if a Forest player had been sent off for the second one that people are talking about, I'd have been pretty annoyed. The first one, definitely, where he obviously left something on Alanga, and that was closer to a red than a yellow. But the second one, for me, I don't think was a yellow. What about you?
Yeah, the first one was ridiculous. And when you do, obviously, if you're in the ground, you see it firsthand and that's it done. You watch the replays of it. Given Keane's career trajectory, it's one I followed pretty keenly. And apologies for the pun there, completely unintentional. And he's done magnificently well to get to where he's got to. But, I mean, that challenge, just, you can't... And I would have done it many a time, remonstrated with the ref saying, I can't believe you but me. He just literally looks at Anthony, just runs into him, and then kind of goes to the official, what? Well, I mean, that will never, ever be football, just running out. It's potentially very dangerous. Alanga's looking at the ball in the air. Someone just runs into him. And as you say, Matt, that dials up a couple of notches. You are looking at potential red cards. The second one where Anthony runs into him, just looks clumsy and messy enough for it not to be a yellow. It's definitely not a second yellow because of this high bar that the PGMOL talk about. It's a first yellow card for me, but if you are getting to the point where you're potentially sending a player off, that second one's got to be more sinister than the first one, and that wasn't. I always think in those positions, and I've done it again playing, where you just make it look a bit messy. Oh, but ref, I'm trying to get out of the way. I mean, I don't know where Keane goes in that split second because Anthony's very quick, and to get out of his way is very tough anyway. But it was just the right side of it looking clumsy rather than sinister, and he meant to do it. But I could absolutely understand the frustrations, because the minute the referee books Morgan for that challenge, which was the first yellow card of the game, not every tackle has to be deemed to be worthy of a caution or not a caution. It can just be an attempt at a tackle, which that was. It was a losing of a ball going forward. It was a reaction by a player that's become known for being one of the first ones to hunt the ball back for Forest, hasn't he, Morgan? He's relentless in the way he goes about trying to win the ball back. And he's stretching every sinew to try and get the ball hooked back round. And it's a genuine attempt to play the ball. And when I see a player get booked for that, it's just so frustrating. It's not petulant. It's not him throwing his toys out the pram because the team's lost the ball and making a foul. It's just him trying to win the ball back cleanly. And then once that happens, it does set a precedent, doesn't it, with regards to what the referee does after that. Elliott seemingly was charging around for a little period in the middle of the first half, where he looked to be exasperated by what was going on about him. Norgard, I say cleverly, he was asking for a second yellow card for Elliott's for another skirmish in the middle of the pitch for Elliott, which I'd literally give it one of them, which is by definition he should have got a yellow card for doing that, but he did it as the referee turned round, so he didn't get done for it. But then obviously got booked further on in the game. I would say broadly, and not being a referee apologist at all, I would say a lot of the decisions that he made, he got right. I know that on another night, if he lets the game go, it might be a completely different thing. But there wasn't too much in... I understand the role that Keane was playing. He got tackled first and foremost, spent more than a couple of minutes doing his socks and got back up, which riled, obviously, our side of the stadium. There's then that challenge on Elanga. His reaction to the challenge of Elanga smashed him and told him to get the F up, didn't he? And you go, you just look mental doing that, running into someone and then just saying, get up off the floor. And then I thought there was just enough grey area in the second one not for it to be a yellow card. But again, I can understand the frustrations of the fans because it didn't really help with the flow of the game, did it? No,
I agree. I mean, for me, regardless of, first yellow, second yellow, I just honestly didn't think the second one was worthy of a yellow card. Like I say, if a Forest player got sent off for that challenge, I'd be pretty annoyed on here. Pete or Mark, do either of you think Lewis Potter should have been sent off?
Well, for me, I think all the chat around the refereeing stuff, it probably illustrates a couple of things. One is, there's two things fans are always asking for from referees, right? Well, I probably said this on the podcast before, so forgive me if I'm bleating on again. One is common sense, and the other is consistency. And you can't have both of them. We have to be grown up as football fans. If we want refereeing to be good, if we want progress in that area, we all, have frustrations of various elements. We have to understand that you can't have both of those things. If you want consistency, then you want the second yellow to be given. Fine, I don't have an issue with it. If you want common sense, you want them to say, look, we don't want players leaving football matches for things that they shouldn't be leaving football matches for. Also don't have an issue with it. I think if the referee sticks to one of those things during a game, then I've just got no problem with it. Personally, I think the other difference is being in the ground and not being in the ground is very different. I mean, how often do you come away from a football match being in the ground thinking that was a disgrace from the referee? I think it's just because you're feeling it all a little bit more, and every little bit counts more. Watching on the TV last night, because I ended up not going to the game, I thought the referee was basically absolutely fine. Nothing that I would kick off about. I think the Morgan yellow card was unfair in exactly the way that Prutz said, but I also think you're asking an awful lot of referees to be right about every one of those decisions because, it's really, really difficult and you have to judge intent and all that sort of stuff as well. I think it's hard. I wouldn't have given a yellow card for it, but, if I was the referee, I'd probably have messed everything else up. So I just don't think it's an issue. I've no issues with the ref whatsoever.
I think we could have been smarter, though. I think this is where the Callum injury comes into it as well. If Hudson-Odoi was fully fit on that side, we could have created more situations for Elanga and Aina up against Lewis Potter while he was on the booking. And because we couldn't do that, because Callum was struggling, we never quite manufactured a situation where Lewis Potter was exposed. Thomas Frank would have been standing on the touchline going, looking at his watch going, I've got to get through to half time to change this up. And he did change it up. He'd have been very anxious about that. We never made them pay for that situation because one more and he was gone. And we never created that situation. And one of the reasons for that is because we didn't have a left-hand side to create the overloads to switch it back over to Elanga and Aina given space.
Do you not think he should have gone at Lewis Potter more, though, Elanga, when he got the
He
ball?
He could have done, but we made it easier for Brentford to make sure they could manage that by not having any threat on the other side because it was all that side. So they could just make sure that never happened. Whereas if we were switching, we'd have probably created more chances on that side.
Mark, it goes into that point, mate, where we said about Mbuemo and Sharda. If you'd have all seen the fact that as much as we were looking at Ola and Anthony going, get at him, the moments to be able to do that, literally 1v1 of Elanga against Lewis Potter, were mitigated by Sharda doing a hell of a lot of good work, coming back and doubling up with him. And Mbuemo, again, the other side, both more than happy to sit in and help their whether that was done because Thomas Frank told them to do, whether it was a real kind of very smart kind of game intelligence to do that. And there was a couple of instances that stuck out, going back to your point, Matt, of doing it there was, I don't know whether it's a reticence or going off Mark's point of getting the ball back over here as quickly as possible. But I think Ola had given it to Elanga and he'd given it back, and you could sense the crowd going, why are you giving it back to the fullback? I mean, he's giving it to you to do a specific thing with. But then you were so far up the pitch that even though Anthony's very good in very, very tight spaces, there's one where he stood Potter up and he was beyond him. And there was a little shove. Remember the shove where he pushed him off the pitch, where there's a big uproar for penalty, which would have been fanciful. But the ability to move that quickly over that short a distance is phenomenal. And he'd done it and he was round him and gone. So I can see why you'd be sat there either in the ground or if you were sat at home like Pete watching it, pulling your hair out going, just give it to him, feed it to him. But you do have to once again take into account what the opposition's doing to mitigate that. Because if we can see what that potential risk is, you'd like to think that Thomas Frank, all of his coaches and the 11 players on the pitch have seen the same thing as well. So they're going, right, get over there and protect him. Don't leave him 1v1, because he would have been, after that second coming together, I think is the next challenge, which would have been mistimed. He would have been off, definitely.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I really like Damsgaard's performance, because he took up some really good positions on the right that gave him Mbeumo a lot of space and made Nico's life difficult. I thought Nico was our best player, by the way. I thought he had a really solid game. But yeah, I think Damsgaard, Visser, and Mbeumo, they would get into a lot of top six teams. We're interested to see what happens to them in the summer, certainly. Right. Just before we wrap up then, a couple of other points I wanted to just quickly touch on. In fact, before we move on to the Palace game. I'll throw this one to Mark because Pete's talks about him a lot, but a lot of people in the comments last night, a couple on Twitter in my mentions, Mark, Sangare should be getting more minutes. He should be starting. Sosa as well was another one, but primarily Sangare. Would you pick Sangare, or is that just because our form's dropped off more than the players that are coming in?
Well, he's an option, isn't he? If Nuno feels that we have to change something in that first 11, obviously Hudson-Odoi probably will miss Monday, I would have thought. So maybe there will have to be changes anyway. He came on and looked decent, but that's not a scenario. 2-0 down is not a scenario you want to bring Sangare on. You can't expect him to have a positive impact as a defensive midfielder and as a deep line playmaker to be the one to answer that puzzle, really. But he did okay. I think he looked comfortable on the ball, and his effort was there, and he's got a searching pass in him. I wouldn't be adverse to give him opportunities, but is that going to just unbalance what we've got and what we've had for most of the season, which is a very strong 11 with a very set way of playing, and bringing him in now, is that really going to be the answer? I don't know. I'd like to think there's a Forest player still there for us, but I do have my doubts, because I think there's been fixtures where you think, well, this is a Sangare game, surely, and he hasn't turned to him. So you've got to think that, it's like we said earlier, the faith that Nuno's got in the players on the bench, including Sangare, just isn't there.
Yeah, I mean, my view on Sangare is I don't see any reason to not start Dominguez primarily and then Yates. I think with Sangare, he should be the guy you bring on to see out games, but Nuno doesn't seem to trust him to do it. What actually I think he is actually quite decent at, to me, is actually when you're chasing a game and he's got time on the ball, he can pick a pass and he can be progressive. But can you do that at 0-0 when teams might run past him and things like that? So I actually think he's a decent option off the bench when we're behind, but less so, or Nuno seems to think less so when we're doing the job that we probably spent 35 million quid for, which is a bit of an issue. I'll let Pete, if you do have anything to add to that, I'll throw it to you.
Personally, I think you're bang right. It's probably the only time I've ever disagreed with Mark about anything. I personally think you can't. Well, I wouldn't trust Sangare to start games for us right now. There's too much riding on it, and he's shown that he just can't compete in the state that he's in currently. And so often players are running off him, balls are dropping, all that sort of stuff, and he just isn't someone I think we can trust in that area. There are much better options. However, I do think if we're struggling and if we're down, that's his chance, because what he needs is time and space and not people all over him, because then he can play the balls, and he's probably the best passer of a lot of those balls that we've got in the side. I just don't think. I think it's game state reliant totally, and I don't think we can change our game plan so much at this point of the season that suddenly we're looking to dominate games in central midfield with the ball and keep possession. And that's what Sangare will need. I think we all thought we were getting something slightly different from him. And whether he is that player and injuries and illness have taken it away, or whether he just never was that player, I think that's all up for question. But I think the only option, as I see it, is that if we're struggling, he's the one who might be able to just pick a lock and get one of those wingers through on goal like we have seen him do. But I wouldn't trust him to play in a midfield battle right now from the start.
Yeah, he is probably the most creative option we had on the bench, given that there's no faith in Sousa and Jota, it seems, to do that. So in terms of picking a lock, yeah, I agree. But that's not an ideal scenario, is it? That we're turning Sangare to be the one to unpick a defence when we're 2-0 down with 15 minutes to go.
Not when you dropped your record transfer fee on him as well. I thought one of our record transfer fees to be a defensive midfielder, and you want him to be coming on to be the creative midfielder. Yeah, it's not perfect. So let's just look at Palace quickly on Monday. Someone referenced in the chat about, Adam Wharton in their midfield. They've got a lot of quality. Pruts. A question to you, I suppose, would be from a player's point of view, FA Cup on the horizon. Will they be completely at it or not? Or is that wishful thinking on my part?
It's slightly fanciful because you need these players to be absolutely at it. And to be absolutely at it, you can't drop. You don't want to be rested too much at this stage of the season because you want to be in that team that starts the final, don't you? So you've got a side who resolutely put Villa to the sword, didn't they? And then you look at what is available to them. Wharton's a fantastic footballer. I mean, the bit that maybe, no, well, not maybe, but I mean, definitely Mark could pick me up on is sometimes he's one of those players that if you try and quantify him with goals and assists, there's a bit of a hole. But you watch him and you go, he's a really good footballer. He does a lot on the pitch. But as we do nowadays, if you're a midfielder, how many goals he score, how many assists, and it's not. I mean, setting the world alight. But he, as part of a collective, they're a good team. I mean, it's an understatement to say that they're a good team with players of the likes of Eze and Jean-Philippe Mateta that have just flourished again this season, especially Eze. And their ability with the likes of Sarr with the ball at the feet should be something that Forest have got to be very, very wary of. I can't see it being a side that's totally focused on the FA Cup because, as we know, wherever you finished in the Premier League, incrementally the value increases. So they'll be going for it from a league point of view, and also with half a mind to be in the best possible form to hit the FA Cup in the right frame of mind. So there's a lot there to give Forest food for thought. But again, let's not get too caught up in the disappointment of last night or portions of recent games. Flip that. A Forest that's firing on all cylinders against a Palace side which has consistently not done as well as Forest this season should be something that Palace need to be very, very wary of. And maybe playing away from home, not in the sense of what the atmosphere would be, because as I said, the atmosphere is his ground, second to none, but being able to afford the opposition possibly more of the ball, so Forest can kind of use what they've been good at, which is attack at pace on the counter. Might just give them a bit more of a singular focus instead of getting bogged down with, as you say, who's going to be our creative force in midfield. Stick to what's been really, really good, which is pace out wide and decent delivery into the box, which again, last night wasn't the case.
I'm conscious that we've done over an hour and Mark's probably going to get booted out of his hotel room very shortly. And Pete's probably got something to do. I don't know. Well,
I'm just waiting for the next pub review, mate. Can we just please take a moment to reference what I think is maybe the best comment I've ever seen in the comments on this podcast?
Where?
One of the audiences just said, "It's all moot and makes no difference." And James Donk says, "Are you talking about Forest or just existentially?" And I think that is absolutely spot on.
It's true. If it was all moot and make no difference, all of this is rendered pointless, and everything's rendered pointless.
Life is meaningless. That's what they're saying. Yeah. I mean, it's not a great way to end. It's a good way to start because then you can build up from it and make sure that everyone feels valued and loved. But to finish, I mean, we're knackered then, aren't we?
True. Right. As I say, we've done over an hour. Mark's probably got to escape his hotel room soon, so we shall.
He's got to put his trouser press back together, hasn't he? Mark is just.
We'll get ahead to some final thoughts. We'll kick it off with Mark. Anything you want to say, Mark, before we go?
No, just on the hotel though. This was my lucky hotel, and it's quite expensive. I started staying at this hotel for the playoff semi-final against Sheffield United, and I've had to come back here every time because we've never lost. So one upside from last night is I can now shop around in the budget hotel market for when I next stay in Nottingham, and it won't cost me as much. So yeah, the luck, it didn't bring me the luck this time. So I'm looking forward to Palace. They are a team who will give us chances, and if you look at the data on them, they have been conceding chances. They will cause us problems. I think the best we can hope for maybe is some curtailed minutes for Eze. I think with Eze's injury record, he's a player they will want to protect for the final. Maybe a little bit Mateta as well with Nketiah there. So we might get fewer minutes of them on the pitch. That's probably, as Prut said, the best we can hope for in terms of them having their minds on the FA Cup final. So we've got to go there and turn it round. Now, after that performance last night, hopefully, Nuno gets amongst them, puts it right, and if they want to grab this opportunity, it's still there for them. But we've got to go and put out a much better performance at Palace. And I've still got every faith we can do that.
Well, if you want a much cheaper hotel across the road from where you normally stay, there is one. But I think it's a bit of questionable when it comes to the kind of clientele.
I thought you were going to put one of the sponsors there, Matt. Was that another one you were going to roll out?
No, I can't name it because I think it might be a knocking.
There must be a rumour that they have somewhere.
Rather than
by the hour, yeah. Keep that
an hour show off.
I knew I shouldn't have said that. I knew Prutton was going to take it down some kind of rabbit hole. Pete, anything you want to add? Save me quickly.
All I can think about is James Donk's comment, and I'd keep thinking about that Fast Show sketch. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. The painter screaming black. No, what I was going to ask about, I think that you missed something pretty big from the agenda today, Matt, which is very disappointing. I wanted to ask Prutz what he thought of that brilliant early free kick with Gibbs White and Hudson-Odoi.
Yes, it was. And this will really stick in the craw, but it sadly reminded me of Neil Warnock doing it with Michael Brown in the early noughties. So that was my first reference. I said, "Oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, it was great." Doesn't help when your teammates then stood offside and the flag goes straight up. That kind of knackers the whole thing, doesn't it? Yeah. Then proceeded to argue with him who was offside. Going, this is a genuine argument now. You've ruined it. But yeah, it was a nice bit of pantomime and theatre, wasn't it? I mean, it looks a bit silly when it don't come off, but it's I mean, as we know, the set piece industry has boomed in recent seasons, given the specialist roles. I saw Keith Andrews, former colleague of mine, up and every time Brentford had it with the big and you got there and I think you've got to be able to do that and wear really, really tight tracky bottoms. So. At least one of those things rules me out of being able to ever do it. That's the tight tracky bottoms because I'd look ridiculous in them, and a lack of talent to be able to create set pieces. But
It's probably the only role where you'd have the camera on you more than you do now, though, Prutz.
Exactly. So that really, I seen what you've done there, Pete. Really works with my narcissism. Maybe I can. Maybe I can do that. Yes, correct. I will.
If we're going to do free kicks like that again, we need an acting coach, not a set piece coach.
Exactly.
Don't think they really convinced anyone. And then they hit the first man with the free kick as well, and it was offside. So, yeah, not one for the end of season highlight video, certainly. David Prutton, I should say, congratulate you for your Sky Sports video, which David Mitchell picked up and tweeted about. Absolutely fantastic. Was that your idea? Did you want it or not?
Was that my idea? No, it wasn't. When things like this get thrown up, they generally come to me because they know that
you're a client will do anything they ask.
Pretty much, and anything for attention. It's really rather desperate if you think about it existentially. But it was good fun. It was good fun to do. Obviously, you work your way through the comments. I don't try to, and people send me screenshots and stuff. And a couple of people didn't quite get that it was a parody of a parody. Sky have done this, and it's David Mitchell did it 15 years ago. Miles better. We know that's why it exists, and that's why we've then gone and done it. And there is also the element of being as near to the knuckle as possible when you are taking the mickey out of what you're doing, then proceed to do 4 games on the bounce of varying quality, and you're kind of going, and are we running it again? Yes, we are. Brilliant. So no, it's good. Bit of levity, isn't it? Because football's a very, very serious business. So something to mess about going into Easter. So it's thank you very much.
You did it in one take, right? It was just one.
Of course. Yeah. I wasn't for 1 second walking around the Pride Park pitch for 4 hours in a suit, absolutely sweating. Which, I was very much in enemy territory, having a little look at what was going on.
Let me ask you a proper question quickly, Prutz, actually, while we've got you, because I'm not sure if you'll be on again before the end of the season. Hopefully you will be. Leeds and Burnley, what chance do you give them next season?
That's a very good question. If anyone saw the Leeds Bristol City game on Monday, I mean, talk about, the gulfing class between two teams that aren't that far away from each other in the division is staggering. Leeds will have to go again. I think there's a couple of players there that have given the Premier League a blast and not really been able to cut it. I'd like to think there's motivation there to be better. As a collective, I think they'll have to look at the goalkeeping situation from a striking point of view. Joe Perreault has scored a lot of goals, but again, yet to cut it in the Premier League. So they've got a decent chance. Burnley, wonderful defence, but again, they won't be tested anywhere near as much in the Championship as they will next season in the Premier League. And Scott's already given it a crack, hasn't he? As Daniel Farkas has taken teams up and not really been able to keep them up. So the answer to the question isn't a very straightforward one. I'd like to think they'd give it a better crack than the 3 teams that went up and have come straight back down. That's happened, of course, the last 2 seasons. Before them, teams that have gone up and done wonderfully well, i.e. a Nottingham Forest. Consolidation is the first port of call, and you need a bit of luck with that, and you need to be playing out your skin for 38 games. So they've got a decent chance of survival, is all I can say, mate, without it needing wholehearted surgery and a lot of money spent. But as again, things that we're preaching to the converted here, you can't go spending too much money because you get your fingers wrapped, don't you? And if you manage to survive with a 2-point deduction, as Forest did, that's almost been seen as the way to do it, I think. I mean, it's laced with jeopardy and fraught with danger. But if you can get through that little bar and get over it, you're potentially knocking on the door of the Champions League. So they've got as good a chance as any of the sides in the bottom 8 spots of the Premier League. There you go.
We shall leave it there, unless you want to answer Marty's question about what bike have you got, Prutz. I don't know if that's of interest.
Oh, I love talking about it, but for people that aren't interested, it's that you just see them glaze over. It's a Triumph Bonneville, if that works for you, my friend. And I'd say it's a midlife crisis, but I've been riding for a very long time. But anyway, that's for a different podcast, lads. Full Chat is a podcast that I do with you and Thomas. It's all about motorbikes. Get it wherever you get your podcast from. Bye.
Bye. Right. We should say goodbye. We will be back tomorrow with a Palace preview. I didn't ask Pete about Palace because he is on that Palace preview with Temps. And then we'll have an opposition preview, which I've already recorded with Matt from a team called Palace. Then a post-match show, and we've got a bit of other stuff to come as well, I'm sure. Do us a favour, if you enjoyed this, do hit like, do hit subscribe, do consider membership or Patreon, or just give us a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Certainly hit like on this video, that'd be great. Mark Sutherns, thank you very much. You've got a long journey home to come now, so thanks for your time.
All good. Thanks very much, Matt. Thanks, Prutz. Thanks, Pete. Good to see you.
Pete Blackburn, thank you very much. I'm going to clip up your monologue and see how that goes down in the world of social media, so good luck and thank you.
Pray for my mentions.
Mute them. Turn off your mentions, or do what Prutz did and leave Twitter. David Prutton, thank you very much.
My pleasure. The reason, the main reason I left, people would say it's because it's very quick for someone to get in touch and tell you what they think about it. There's that, but I was spending far too much time sat in the toilet. You take it out for 2 seconds and 20 minutes later you go, I've been sat here for 20 minutes now. This is a ridiculous waste of my time. So now we just do that with Instagram instead.
Right. We shall leave it there. As I say, thanks very much for everyone's company. We'll be back tomorrow. If we don't see you then, we shall see you soon.